Hi, everyone. I'm Marty Berman, and this is the MarTech Memo podcast, where we break down how AI, RevOps, and MarTech reshape frontline execution. Today, I'm joined by Jocasta Olp, VP of Customer Success at SafelyYou. SafelyYou is using AI to help memory care communities prevent falls and improve resident safety. It's a smart mix of technology and care design to give families and staff more peace of mind. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jocasta. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, I really loved our conversation that we had the other week, and you're in such a really unique and interesting space. And from a customer success standpoint, it certainly, as we talked about it, it's such a unique way that you have to approach your role, given what Safely You does. What does customer success look like, when your buyer is a senior living operator and your end user is a family?
Yeah, so we have to tell different value props to all of those different levels of buyers and customers. And so we are laser focused on that. So, what is nice with my organization, so with customer success, it embodies two arms to it. So, I have the clinicians who are mostly PTs, OTs, nurses who interact at the community level and they interact with executive directors, memory care directors, assistant living directors, and they are looking at the outputs from our products. So that could be fall videos, data around wellness, data around staffing, and they're interacting with them daily to show that value, the ROI, putting recommendations and suggestions in place for the care of the residents and how they can optimize the space that they're living in. And so we have that arm and that ear. And then we also have the ear at the operator level. And so that would be maybe the C suite of that operator. It could be some of the VPs. We have the VP of clinical, VP of operations
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
showing all of those different values to them as well, and why it's so beneficial to have an AI that is connected to a sensor that is looking into a resident's room and making these really interesting detections and analysis in the space. So we do that. And then I also have an arm that is around implementation. So those are that
Right.
entry point, that onboarding, that's that first value level and creation and the adoption there. And so what they're doing, they are talking mostly to the leadership. So not so much the end users at first, but the leadership and just reinforcing why they purchase Safely You. When with that purchase, not all of those key stakeholders are always at the table, right? So someone like the head of their IT might not have been in that decision because it was an operation, buying decision. But we need to get IT's buy-in, right? We're going to need to make sure we have Wi-Fi or the internet up and running that's really empowering our devices. We also need to make sure that they're charged. So making sure that the outlets are continuing to be plugged in or we're connected in a manner where if there is an outage, that they have hands on deck that can assist us. So we're going through all of those different things. But really, what we're trying to say is this is a critical technology and tool that is for the benefit of the resident. Right? If we make it resident centered, those individuals who are going to really receive the care and receiving the most benefit from our tools. So we just always remember that, and that's really in our mission statement and our vision as well. And so we try to just live that out. So at Safely You, our mission statement is every room has a hero and every resident has a voice. And we want to exude that and we want our customers to understand that. And then from a vision standpoint, it is worry-free senior care for everyone everywhere. And so that's how we bring in the staff and the operators and all of these other entities that we want it to be worry-free for them for what they do. So if we just keep that focus in mind, that's how we really try to execute on customer success.
Yeah. But you've got so many, as we talked about before, you're not, your stakeholders are not like a traditional
No, not at
layered
all.
stakeholder from, let's say, a B2B SaaS company, which is where you came from at Vigilance. But, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But so it's a much deeper and I would say more like a much wider constituency that you've got to deal with, even from at a REIT level, right?
Yep.
So who may own the operator and they want to know how they're doing But yet there's also those multiple layers that you have to deal with all the way on to the individual families, which is just, it's a much different customer success or chart, I would imagine, stakeholder chart than most companies.
Yeah, we've got, I would say, 4 primary. So in the middle
Yeah.
there would be the operator. So those are the individuals who run and manage a senior living community. And
Right.
so those are usually the corporate names that you see, and they have a collection of communities underneath their
Right.
portfolio. And so they are the ones who typically will sign the contracts for technologies and doing that entity. And then below them, they have the communities and that leadership and who is managing the day to day and doing the resident care at the community. And then from there, you have the resident. And then the resident could be either we would say, like, as a decision maker, it could be the individual that's living in the building, but sometimes that individual has a disease state where they are no longer able to make decisions for themselves,
Right.
most likely a memory care issue of some sort. So, dementia, Alzheimer's, progression in certain types of Parkinson's. And so their families are making the decisions on their behalf as their power of attorney in that
Right.
situation,
Yeah.
talking to them, right? So we have that layer. And then as you go up from the operator, sometimes the operators they are all encompassing. And so they own their buildings outright and they're not just managing it, but they also own them. But there is a layer of capital partners there who actually do the capital funding for the buildings and own the buildings. And so those can be venture capitalists or they
Right.
could
Or
also.
meets. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with that, it's all of those have different layers, again, like I said, of those value props
Right.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
you have some that is looking at it from a management, like how like operators looking at it, like how happy are their staffs? What are, they're looking at the financials, they're looking at their what's like their NOI, their net operating
Hmm.
cost, and really trying to tailor that down. The REITs are looking at this purely at a real estate play, and
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
it, because they don't just have senior living facilities. They might
Yeah.
have
Exactly.
college housing, apartment buildings, things of that nature, and that's all in their portfolio. So they're looking at how can they make those more efficient so then they can sell that off. And then as
Yeah.
you go
Right.
work your way through that, then you have more of the care level. So at the community, they're thinking about care, they're looking at their occupancy, how often do they have a resident in a room and how long does that resident stay? So their length of stay and then that turnover rate. And then of course you've got the resident and their family and they're just wanting to have the best time and the joy of aging and aging in this place of their residency at the senior living facility.
Yeah, I mean, again, that it's just such it's amazing to hear all those different stakeholders and how they each have unique, perspectives that you have to cater to and make sure that they're communicated to. It just is, it's amazing to me. And we talked about your previous role at Vigilance, and what would you say from a customer success lesson that you really were able to translate into Safely You and what didn't?
So I would say from there, one of the biggest translations at Vigilance, which is now a part of a Novolon, that was a more data-driven SaaS organization. So
Right.
different flavor. We had an interconnection with our tools was utilized in hospitals and healthcare systems, and it connected to their EHR. So very SaaS based, and it was all about the power of data. And so that was one of the things that I really took with that is that storytelling with data and making sure that you are utilizing that to match your champions and stakeholders, their metrics and needs. And so we could talk all day about what our product does and adoption rates and all of these different KPIs. It means nothing if it doesn't align with their KPIs because our tool could be working as designed, doing the best thing possible. And we
Right.
still like get churned because we didn't show successes that match what their company and their organization was looking at for those individuals, right? And so
Yeah.
that was something that I really focus in on and brought with me to SafelyYou.
Yeah, I mean, because, with with what Safely You does with all that data, and we talked about that in terms of, how AI is able to help so much in these situations, and that ultimately is that data that is, I think is just such a, as a former caregiver to my parents, again, it's just something that is, being able to have that additional layer on top of, if someone's in a care facility, really, I think is more reassuring, because it's able to capture so much more than when someone's not in the room, really. And that's where I think that, that data and taking all that data and making sure that that gets rolled out in terms of care, I think is really that next level of care and it's exciting to see how it's being used within these environments.
Yeah. And when thinking about safely, so kind of putting my example of how you could focus on the wrong thing to light. So
Mhm.
our bread and butter is around the fall or on the ground event
Right.
detection. So we could focus in a lot on that data, like how many on the ground events were happening, and and looking at that piece of it. And then, but if we were to hand that to an ED and they were just talking about basically the number of falls, that's gonna miss the mark, right? We're
Right.
not telling the complete story. What is the real insight that we're bringing is because you have this, then now we have an understanding of the severity of the injury or what might have happened on that ground, or during that fall, and so do we need to send them out to the ER? Because typically in a scenario, if a caregiver were to come in and find them on the ground, they would assume and default that they hit their head, right? Without, if they don't know, you
Yeah.
assume that and then you send them out. And when in doubt, send them out. And that is expensive. An ER visit is expensive. It is expensive to the resident and their family. It causes a lot of distress. And so that family might move them out and think that their loved one is not safe. Like there's this cascade. When SafelyYou comes into the picture, we have an understanding of exactly what happened and why they were on the ground. It could have been an individual that was just bending down to pick up, their laundry and sat on the ground and remained there. And since they might have, dementia or Alzheimer's, they might not remember why they
Right.
the floor, right? Or how long they've been there. So a caregiver comes in, they can't explain it, and they send it out to the ER. It wasn't even a fall at all. It was just an on the ground event. And so that is a complete shift in that
Well,
conversation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, complete
Or
shift, and it No, 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 you go ahead, go ahead.
Or we have the opposite scenario where someone does have a really hard fall, but they get back up and then they get in bed, right?
Right.
And they're no longer on the ground. So the caregiver sees them. They're looks like they're sleeping in bed, but they had a head injury. We
Yeah.
also avoid that because that's worst case scenario where they go to sleep and they don't wake up, right?
Yeah.
We make sure that they get the care that they need. And so it is that balance. Like in that situation, I want that ER sent out. We want to have that positive outcome. We want to
Yeah.
say life. And so that's how, instead of it just being data around falls, you have this enriching story to really understand the why. And then those champions that we are creating, they see our tool as invaluable, right? And that it has to be in place and they will champion for it. They will fight for it. And that's what we want. That's what customer success is really driving for.
Yeah, and today I know we're observed everywhere, right? And this is a little bit more personal. So how do you roll out, AI and memory care without it feeling cold or, surveillancy, which we talked about?
Yeah, and right now too, our primary product is a clear video as well, and so we currently don't blur with our primary product, and so it is a change. It's a complete change for all of those different stakeholders that are involved and with that level of transparency that is occurring, right? So some of the things we just actually lay it out there. This is what it is, but there are provisions around it, and so it is always detecting, not always recording per se. And so in a looped fashion, so think I always like to use the analogy of like surveillance cameras in a gas station, and so you go in and people kind of know that the tape is on a 24-hour loop. And so I think people have seen it on different shows where you're like, I can't get the tape. It's been 24 hours. So ours
Yeah.
is on like a 10-minute loop where we continuously just write over that. And then once it's written over, it's gone forever. It's not stored. What is triggered is when there is that on the ground event and that has been validated that it is a true on the ground event, then that recording is saved. And so you get that 10 minutes before and then for the time of the on the ground event, and then until that individual is off the ground or is transported out of the room. And so we can capture that whole time. Those endpoints can change based off of the customer desires and
Mhm.
needs. That's the typical snippet there. And so that alleviates a lot of fears, right? That like it's just not endless video being stored.
Right.
And then we go through the risk benefit. And just like those scenarios I was saying before about
Yeah.
unknown and what happens in the absence of this video and the absence of this knowledge. And that can alleviate a lot of fears and needs there. And then you have to just start talking through, so that's at the resident level and then getting them to think through it. We will not activate this unless the resident says yes to that they do want this service. They are fully aware of it and that they want the service in place. And if they say no, it's turned off. If they say yes, it's turned on. It's really that simple there. And so that's one part. And then there's other entities that are still worried about this, right? It's a
Right.
camp a building that is a business that is, at risk of litigation and scrutiny as well, that now has a video associated to maybe the care that occurred or an incident that occurred. But again, it also goes both ways there, where you have
Right.
the
It can be positive too, right?
but if you have a situation that occurs, you can correct the behavior, right? You can see where
Yeah.
your bad apples are and you can correct that. I think of it as like the cams that you have like on law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
It corrects that behavior, but it's a protection on both sides. In these situations too, you have individuals who don't have strong memory and might have statements around what was going on in a situation that is just false because it is a false memory. I wouldn't say that it's malicious. It's just the nature of their disease state, right? And this
Yeah.
also can bring that peace of mind that no, actually, this is exactly what happened here. Like this, they got very compassionate care. We can show you the video, and things like that nature. So it just changes the conversation. And then when you just see all of the other benefits, you really start to understand and you see how it's such a value.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, so one final question, like where does customer success end and product start at SafelyYou?
Yeah, so that is a great question because we are living out product, right? With customer success, we make sure that what was promised is executed on. And so we have a very close relationship. And so with our flow of products, we go through the process of like alpha, beta, and then getting it to GA or general
Huh.
availability.
Right.
And so that's in lockstep. So customer success really steps in and takes full ownership when something is in that general availability. But while it's in alpha and beta, it's a full feedback loop while we're testing it with usually one customer and then a handful of customers. The customer success team, especially my clinicians, are really involved because they are the gatekeepers at the community level. So our product team will come in, they're joining those touch points, which we call huddles. They're joining those and asking questions. They have hypotheses that they are wanting to get answers to. They're getting all of those, the sentiment, the suggestions, all of that feedback, and then enhancing the product, making tweaks and updates there. So we have this wonderful working relationship around that feedback piece of it. Outside of that, too, our team, once something is in general availability, continues to look at a different iteration. So it could be new ideas or it could be additional enhancements that get put into the ideation workflow for product so
Yeah.
they can make additional features and updates to our existing products to just drive up the value.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Jocasta, for sharing all this today. It was really a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.